Hey YouTube, for a change it's raining again. I had an intelligent email from a practicing Jehovah's Witness saying that although they accepted the organisation's conduct did indeed conform with the BITE model, they felt that BITE depended on only 4 points, and it seemed too broad a set of criteria to be persuasive to them. And although I'm in danger of complying with the logical fallacy of moving the goalposts, I felt his doubts had sufficient merit for me to respond to it. This time I'm going to look at Lifton's 8 points of mind control cults. Again, Lifton is a published academic, and the information referenced was not written with Jehovah's Witnesses specifically in mind, but to help identify all cultic activity. There is, however, a problem with any cult identification criteria, in that those suffering inside the cult cannot be depended upon to have the independence of thought to recognise their own positions. Just ask a Mooney, a Scientologist or a Jehovah's Witness. I feel this observation is confirmed by the naked and illogical hatred dispensed by some serving Jehovah's Witnesses when presented with something to think about. Rather than face facts and think, some have reacted with immature emotions, which indicates that the cult has managed to bypass the rational mind and implant phobic reactions to unaligned information. Anyway, back to Lifton. The first point is milieu or environment control. I think this was adequately dealt with in the previous video, but Lifton adds the subtlety of worldview and communication control. For example, the organisation through its publications provides selective unreferenced quotes and information to support their requirements. They then discourage outside study or fact-checking, so it is impossible for the member to achieve any other conclusion from what the cult wants. Effectively, they put thinking on rails. Communication is further controlled by discouraging conversation about embarrassing events, so that history can be easily revised. A good example of this is 1975. The history of this event is so distorted, there are Jehovah's Witnesses that believe that there never was a prophecy. Another example is that Jehovah's Witnesses are constantly told to protect Jehovah's name, again limiting communication. Next is mythical manipulation. Cults all have this in common. This is often seen at assemblies where experiences are recounted that give the impression that God intervened in their life to protect them because they were Jehovah's Witness. All cults try to give the impression that there is a supernatural and that it is working for them. Do you know Moonies recount the exact stories I've heard at Jehovah's Witness assemblies? Moonies also tell the stories about bad things that will happen to you if you leave, and why the world is such a terrible place without the cult to protect them, and how great it will be when they rule the world. It's funny when every coincidence becomes proof positive of God's hand, and that hand is Jehovah's, and not Allah's, not Odin's, Mary's, Thor, or the Catholic saint or dead pope. The demand for purity. Members are constantly pushed for perfection and to give more, causing guilt and shame because you can never do enough. If you pioneer 1 month, then the pressure is on to never miss your hours again. There is black and white thinking in that only pursuing Jehovah's Witness objectives makes you good. Anything else makes you bad, because as humans we are a mix of good and bad, light and dark. The cult sells itself as the only route to good. The member is made to feel that they constantly fail the cult, but the cult can never ever fail them. Sacred science is when the cult has the only truth exclusively to them, and the leadership cannot, must not be questioned. Questioning them is questioning God, because everything they say is sacred and special, and the members are only flawed humans. Questioners like me are said to be demonized, immoral, mentally diseased, or biased against truth. Often the sacred knowledge makes no logical sense. But the leaders tell the sheep that it does, and this is accepted because it provides emotional satisfaction. A cult of confession is when group members monitor their own and each other's commitment to the cult. Often it is expressed in the requirement to tell the elders of your own failings or the failings of other cult members, lest you share in their sin. This has the effect of the cult owning the internal personality of the member. This culture of confession allows the elders to seek out and shepherd weak members back to where they should be. It essentially keeps the exits covered, making it harder to leave. There's loading the language. This is covered in my previous video, but I would also add that Jehovah's Witnesses are expert at implanting thought-stopping cliches, making it almost impossible to think without bias. Doctrine over person is very strong with Jehovah's Witnesses. A good example of this is the Watchtower constantly telling us that true happiness is achieved with field service ministry. So the member goes for it, but still remains discontent. The Watchtower then tells us the discontent is our own fault, and that we must pray and work harder, doing more of what makes us unhappy, illogically, in order to be happy. The cult is never wrong. You are. Therefore there's something wrong with you. Therefore you emotionally harm yourself as you alter yourself to fit their requirements. The members give up education, fun associations, lucrative employment, etc. to chase the Jehovah's Witness dragon. The eighth and final point is dispensing of existence, covered in my previous video, but boils down to the cult assuming the power to choose who lives and who dies, and the terms of this dispensation. Naturally, ex-members and apostates are most feared by the leaders, and are therefore the most damned, the most dead. Coming away from Lifton, I mentioned earlier that this cult had managed to bypass the rational mind by the use of Lifton and Hassan's techniques. But for me, the practical upshot of all of this is that the cult has implanted phobia after phobia to make the process of finding the true self almost impossible. There are many phobias they use: apostasy, blood, Christmas, loss of family, demons, but the irrational fear the Jehovah's Witness had been able to implant into me as a child was the fear of premature death, whilst others had paradise. Selfish, I know. At one stage I obeyed the cult mindlessly to earn that prize and not face my personal terror. Once I was able to recognise the fear, put it into context and put it aside, I was able to think clearly, and the whole Jehovah's Witness BS instantly fell apart, and for the first time I was a free man. Of course I'm going to die one day, like everyone else always has, but now I make sure I enjoy life and don't live and slave in fear. I am truly happy. Because of this and the previous video that's meant to help those in the cult to identify mind control, I think it would help for us that have escaped if we made videos about the largest phobia and obstacle to leaving that we had and how we overcame it. If possible, putting the phobia name in the title so that serving Jehovah's Witnesses can easily see the problem they are faced with and how others dealt with it. I think it would help some Jehovah's Witnesses find their rational mind and make the change they know they need to make.